Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Haider Mehdi, and this is Haider Mehdi's Perspectives, voice for the downtrodden and the oppressed across the world, especially Muslims and in Pakistan. Our guest today is Dr. Zafar Bangish. Dr. Zafar Bangish is the director of the Institute of Contemporary Islamic Thought and has a very clear cut view about what is happening in the Muslim world, the developments that have taken place, and has been for the last 4 or 5 decades a soldier fighting for the rights of the oppressed, especially amongst the Muslim Ummah. Dr. Zafar Bangish, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the program, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and my salams to all of your viewers and listeners as well.
Thank you very much. Dr. Zafar Bangish, we do this weekly program with you in English, and the specific objective is to present an alternate voice of what is happening in the world today, especially with reference to the oppression against the Muslims, especially in Syria, in Gaza, in Palestine, and what the Zionist entity and the imperialist powers of the West are doing to the Muslims. So that is really our objective. The reason we do it in English is that it's also, we hope that it will reach non-Muslim powerful voices in the corridors of power and shake their conscience. So the recent developments in Syria have thrown up another maybe a potentially a potential conflict, whereby there is a plan of the Zionist regime in Israel to attack the Ansar Allah, the Houthi tribe, but basically Ansar Allah in Yemen, and because this they feel is the last barrier for their ultimate attack on Iran, who is their ultimate target. So, what do you make of this, Dr. Bangish?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. There is no doubt that the Zionists feel emboldened after their ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon and taking over Syria completely. So they feel that now they have the upper hand and they have an opportunity to crush the last remaining resistance front, which is the Ansar Allah in Yemen. Of course, that's something that they wish and they plan, but the Ansar Allah are a really very, very dedicated, tough group of people. They have supersonic missiles. They are very determined. They have never been subdued. If we look at the history of the last 8 years, from 2015 to 2023, when the Saudis and the Emiratis launched their attack against the Ansarullah, and of course the Saudis and Emiratis were backed by the US, Britain, France, providing them intelligence information, logistical support, weapons, etc. And at the same time, the Saudis and Emiratis had hired mercenaries from South America, Africa, etc. Yet the Ansarullah were able to beat them and force the Saudis to seek a ceasefire. So now the Zionists think that they will be able to take on the Ansarullah and even perhaps invade them. I don't know how they can do that. There is no common border between Yemen and the Zionist entity. Secondly, the Ansarullah are no pushover. There is no doubt that the Zionists can inflict a lot of damage using their air force, but the Ansarullah can inflict equal amount of damage on the Zionists. So what we need to look at is which party is able to absorb the losses that are inflicted upon them, whether it's the Ansarullah or the Zionists. You see, the Zionists are luxury-loving people, and when the situation gets tough, they want to flee that place. I mean, already there are reports that at least 1 million Zionists have fled the country since this war with the Palestinians erupted in October of 2023. More than 600 businesses have been shut down in the Zionist entity. The Ansar Allah have successfully uh, shut down Israel's Eilat port because they have blockaded the Red Sea. They are not even allowing any American or British or French ships to sail through to go to Israel. Even in the Mediterranean, the Ansarullah are able to target American aircraft carriers. A few days ago, they shot down an American F-18 plane, and the Americans sort of made the excuse that no, this was shot down by friendly fire. It's so pathetic, but actually the Ansarullah have a lot of capabilities, particularly in long range missiles, hypersonic missiles, and they can, because of the fact that they live very simply, and the masses of people are 100% with them. Any Friday, if you look at rallies that they take out in Sana'a, the capital city, more than 1 million people come out for those rallies. I mean, it's unheard of. It's a small country, small in the sense that the population is very small, but 1 million people come out in Sana'a and they brave these threats from the Zionists that they say that we are going to bomb your rallies, etc. And the people still come out. They say, okay, come and attack us. We know you can attack us, but we are not afraid of your bombs or your missiles. We're going to hit back. And so in that sense, if the Zionists were to make a mistake of uh, invading Yemen, I don't know how they will do it, but at least in terms of the determination of Ansarullah, they are quite capable of fighting. They can fight virtually forever. We cannot say the same thing about the Zionists because they are luxury loving people. Anytime there is any crisis, they start running away from the country. And so they will not be able to defeat the Ansarullah in Yemen. And we also need to keep in mind that the Ansarullah are not completely isolated in the sense that if one looks at the map of Yemen, there is a very long sort of link with Oman through the area that's called Hazramut, and a
Yes.
lot of help can be supplied to them through Hazramut. It's a totally barren area, sparsely populated, and so it is. I really do not see how the Zionists are going to succeed against Ansarullah. And the fact that they are issuing these threats clearly indicates that they are really, really worried about the fact that the Ansarullah are a major threat to their project for greater Israel.
Mm. Sir, one of the questions that you raised several times is I wonder how they will attack, but purely from a military tactical perspective, I believe they could, not they will, they could follow the Syria tactic, which was take over a bridgehead. Bridgehead means take a small portion of the territory, like they did with the HTS in Idlib. Keep arming them, training them, get neighboring powers to participate, to join them, take their time, progressively try and weaken the state that they are going to attack, as they did with Syria itself. Very weak. Literally, the Syrian army just melted away. I know there are no direct parallels, but from a strategic perspective, they could use a tip of a piece of Yemen which is not under the control of the Ansarullah, then use the Saudis and the UAE to finance, arm, create insurgents. And over a period of time, not tomorrow, not next month, not next week, perhaps a year, perhaps 2 years, uh, do what they did in Syria. That is one possibility, that Israel, and in the meanwhile, just keep pounding them, with airstrikes, beat them into pulp.
Well, you see, if we look at the map of Yemen, the only place where they can possibly create such a bridgehead would be in the southern part of Yemen, in the port of Aden, which is, of course, the groups over there are aligned with the Emiratis. But they are so far away from Sana'a that they cannot possibly reach Sana'a despite their best efforts. I mean, after all, over the last 8 years, from 2015 to 2023, that's what the Emiratis tried to do, but the Ansar Allah were able to successfully beat them back. They were never able to break out of there. Even if the Zionists were to support these people in South Yemen, which I really doubt very much, because the Yemenis are very, very nationalistic people. They are like the Afghans. They've never accepted anybody's overlordship over them, and so that's not a possibility. You mentioned whether the Saudis, in the north, they could try to use the Saudis to create some problems. The Saudis tried it, of course, as I said, from 2015 to 2023, but they were not successful. In fact, the Ansar Allah were able to beat the Saudis. They were able to carry out many successful attacks against the Saudis, including Saudi hinterland. In fact, they were able to target Saudi oil fields and plants, etc., as far as Riyadh. So I think the Saudis know that the Ansar Allah are quite capable of carrying out major operations against them. I don't think that the Saudis are in a position to undertake any further operations like that. When it comes to, the Ansar Allah were very, very careful in not targeting any civilian targets in Saudi Arabia. But I don't think that they would have any hesitation if the Zionists were to target their civilian population, that the Ansar Allah would hesitate from targeting, for instance, Tel Aviv. They have done it a couple of times. I think they can quite easily do it not once, but many, many times, and they can create real mess in Israel. And I think, if, let's say, one missile were to fall at a densely populated areas such as Tel Aviv or Haifa, Tel Aviv in particular, I think that would send a very, very strong signal to the Zionists. So although I know that the Zionists would want to do that, it is practically not possible for them to do it against Ansarullah.
So the other question that is related to this is, and I just want to go back to the map. So we're talking kind of you're a political strategist. I've served in the military. So of course, Saudi Arabia on top, Rab al Khali, very difficult terrain, by the way. That's why it's called Rab al Khali. It is completely barren. Then on the west, we have the Red Sea, right? And the port of Hudaybiyah, as you said, Hudaydah. And then in the south is the Gulf of Aden. And then we have Aden as well. On the east, we have Oman. And then there is the coast of Africa beneath Somalia. And on the east is Eritrea, Djibouti, etc. So physically, were Israel to do what it has done in Syria and attempts to do in here, this is the geography. Either the north or the south or the east or the west. Which of these do you think is the most vulnerable area when the Ansarullah could be attacked by the Saudis? And here we're talking ground troops. We're talking feet on ground, either militants, terrorists, this Salafi type Daesh, Al-Qaeda groups, again, funded, armed by Israel, by Saudi Arabia, by UAE, by the US. The US I'm going to keep on the side for a moment. What do you think, looking at this map?
You see, when we look at this map, as far as Yemen is concerned, it's not really very vulnerable from any side. Of course, we have the sea, in the south, but with respect to the people in the south of Yemen are already aligned with the UAE. Now, it's possible that Israel might potentially get its forces over there, but the fact that there is no direct connection, number one. Secondly, Israel is way up in the north rather than the south. Logistically, it will be a nightmare for the Zionists. The other possibility could be there is an island called Socotra. It's a British UAE combined. I mean, it's island, but it's a military base. They could potentially use that for launching operations, but those could be basically uh, aerial operations rather than land operations. I do not really see, given the geography of the Zionists, putting boots on the ground
Okay.
because it's just too far away for them. Yeah,
Okay. And I think the other thing that you mentioned is that you just can't beat the Ansar Allah. You know, they're like the Afghans. They're not like the Syrians or the others who just melted away. You know, they've
exactly.
yeah. So and kind of, you know, if I were to put on my military hat to be able to kind of invade Yemen, and they require 300 400,000 troops, and there is no way that Israel can muster that kind of, even amongst the militias. I mean, maybe 20, 30, 40,000 people, but not. So now coming to the US, and I said I'd put the US on the back burner for a while. Do you think with this change, Trump administration and their avowed position that they will not use militancy or arming of militias to bring about regime changes, do you think that will also put a dampening effect, if they are sincere in that approach, on the Zionist regime in Israel?
Well, you see, as you put it, the crucial question is if they are sincere. I doubt it very much. The Americans are just totally unreliable. I mean, Trump is a wild card. He can flip on a dime. So I really wouldn't put any sort of hope in what he says. One can definitely see this, that Trump is a hardcore Zionist. He would support the Zionists to right to the end. But I think even Trump would not want Israel to get into a quagmire as Yemen would be, because Israel would not be able to get out of it. And in that sense, I think if Israel were to try to do anything foolish like that, it would pay a very heavy price. I also
Correct.
want to mention that although the Islamic resistance in Gaza has been considerably weakened, but it has not ended. To their great credit, the Palestinians continue to fight against the Zionists. Every day they are able to carry out resistance operations and kill a few Israeli invaders, soldiers that is, although the Zionists continue to kill a lot of civilians over there, particularly in the north, and they are starving the rest of them into submission. But the Palestinians have not given up. And also, we cannot write off Hezbollah. They are still a formidable force, and they are quite capable of fighting the Zionists should fighting erupt over there. And I want to finally add that Iran is also not out of the picture. Of course, Iran has lost Syria as a land bridge, but we need to keep in mind that when Bashar al-Assad was in power, the Syrian regime did not take part in any fighting against the Zionists. Okay, that's an important point to keep in mind. It was simply used as a land bridge. Now, today, when we look at the situation in Syria, of course, it has become a patchwork of warlords. Uh, in the south, that whole area has been occupied by the Zionists. In the north, Turkey has occupied. In the northwest, America still continues to occupy the area in the northeast, particularly the most productive area of Syria, which is its oil fields, its agricultural lands, etc. And incidentally, last week, the Americans finally admitted that they have 2,000 troops in Syria, not the 900 that they had been peddling and their media had been peddling for years. And we, in the crest,
The funny part was they said there was an error in our calculations, and when we recalculated, instead of 900, they are now 2,000. This is the most funny. the funny statement coming out of a military person.
Exactly.
A military person's life depends on knowing how many people there are in a certain location. And we call that the parade state. What is the
Exactly.
state of the parade? How many people do you have on parade today? This is I think after God, this is the second most important thing in the world for a military man. And someone to say, I don't know. we are so funny.
We in the Crescent International had been writing about it. That we said that there are at least 2,000 American troops. In fact, we had given the figure of 2,200. I mean, we had, information coming out of
You
there.
have information.
People were telling us, and the Americans said, no, we have only 900. I mean, how on earth can you talk about, as you said, the second most important thing is that every military commander has to know how many troops he has under his command in a particular area. I mean, you cannot say, I only have 900.
On that day, on that hour, that minute.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there are so many things involved. For instance, you have to provide provisions for them to feed them. You have to provide weapons for them. You have an inventory of these things, and then you say, well, I don't know. I think we probably have 900. But well, we just recalculated and we discovered that there are 2,000.
Look,
Anyway,
sorry, yeah, please
I
continue.
was
Then
just going
I'd
to
like
say
to question you about Iran. Yes.
that in terms of Syria is basically a patchwork occupied by warlords. So Damascus is in the grip of these Takfiri, Al Qaeda, Daesh terrorists who are trying to sort of the famous cradle statement of putting lipstick on a pig. But the rest of Syria, the vast territory of Syria, is sort of open desert territory. And given the chaos in Syria, given the mass poverty in Syria, it is quite possible for Iran to be able to utilize that opportunity to be able to smuggle weapons through there to Hezbollah. Although Hezbollah has achieved, like the Ansar Allah, great capabilities in terms of missile production, and Ansarullah have even a longer history because when Yemen was sort of under Soviet domination, the Soviet or the Russian Soviet and then later on Russian domination, they provided them a lot of technology, and so they not only provided them weapons, but they also provided them the know-how to make these weapons. And so Yemen has, and then of course Iran has provided them further capabilities. So the Ansarullah have a lot of capabilities,
Good.
indigenous capabilities, to produce their weapons, and they can fight virtually forever. And given their determination, they are intrepid fighters. They don't give up. They are really, really sort of admirable people. And so taking them on is not.
It's going to be a tough challenge.
It
So,
is going to
so,
be a very
so
tough challenge.
yeah. So what we always assume is the worst. We assume the worst. We plan for the best and the worst, and we also assume the worst. What if Israel were to launch a tactical nuclear strike on Houthis, knowing that there is no other way? So now, and that keeping this statement is Iran, and Iran must be anticipating all this that you and I are discussing, right? I mean, it's not. I mean, if we are discussing this publicly, they would be probably a million times more in detail. And they know that Israel is going to, the Zionist regime is going to attack Yemen. And their last resort, they can't put foot on the ground. They probably won't be able to create a Syria-like, Idlib-like. So maybe, possibly, they may actually do a tactical nuclear strike. What options does Iran have today to tell the imperialist West, the US, and the Zionist regime in Israel that if you're even contemplating a tactical nuclear strike, this is what we can do?
Well,
And then we have.
exactly. You see, the thing is that Israel is far more vulnerable than Yemen or Iran, for the simple reason that Israel is a very small country in terms of geographical area.
Yes.
Number two, Israel's nuclear facilities are at Dimona, and their chemical weapons factories and other manufacturing base is in Haifa. And of course, Tel Aviv is its administrative, capital, as well as headquarters of Mossad and military, etc. These three cities. Just imagine, Iran is quite capable of hitting the Damona nuclear facilities. It is quite capable of hitting Haifa, its chemical plants, as well as its industrial base. And it is quite capable of targeting Tel Aviv. That's Iran. The Ansar Allah are also capable of hitting these places. Now, even if a few missiles were to hit Dimona and a few missiles were to hit Haifa's chemical weapons factories, there'll be absolute chaos in Israel. Israel will disappear from the face of this earth. It cannot survive. Of course, there'll be a lot of death and destruction. Other people will also be affected. But suppose that, Israel were to use a tactical nuclear weapon against Yemen or Ansarullah, or even against Iran. Iran is a huge country. Iran can take these blows. Israel cannot. And therefore, Israel would be wiped off the face of this earth. So even when we look at it from a military point of view, Israel is very vulnerable. Of course, the US is there to help it and back it, etc. But using a tactical nuclear weapon would be suicidal for the Zionists. And that's why I think that Israel would not go to that extent. It could, it is run by mad people. Netanyahu and Ben Gavir and Smotrich, and these people are not rational people. They are absolute lunatics. But I think within the Zionist entity, there are also people that have some sense, and they understand that if we do such a foolish thing, that the consequences for Israel would be horrendous, for its people would be horrendous, and Israel would be wiped off the face of the map. So I don't think that they would contemplate that. I think this message, I'm sure Iran would have communicated to the Americans, to the British, the French, and other Europeans through various parties, that if you do that, then all bets are off, the gloves are off, and then it's the end of Israel. And in fact, Iran can do other things. For instance, it can obliterate the oil production facilities of UAE, of Qatar, of Saudi Arabia, and imagine the impact it would have on global economy, American economy, European economy, Japanese economy. It would actually turn the whole world into a nuclear winter. And I don't think that the Europeans or the Americans are unaware of this fact. And so that is probably what would prevent the Zionists from even carrying out a tactical nuclear strike against Yemen. One final point, senior Iranian officials, not only in the Revolutionary Guards, but even people like Dr. Kamal Kharazi, who is the foreign affairs advisor to the Rahbar Imam Khamenei, he has said that if Israel were to launch any such attack, then Iran would have to revise its nuclear doctrine, and it would, which was a clear indication that then they would go for the nuclear weapon. It's quite possible that Iran might have it already. We don't know. I know that they have the capability, they have the know-how of how to make nuclear weapons. Whether they've made it or not, it will be just a very, very short step for them to do so. So that is possible. And I think if Israel were to make that foolish mistake, then that would be the end of Israel altogether.
And actually, it's wonderful you said that, because I really wanted to end on that note. And here is what Kamal Kharazi is saying, that we can produce nuclear weapon if faced with existential threat. And now, clearly, it is an existential threat for what we've seen happen in Syria. So Iran probably has to go that route. Iran probably has to send a clear message that we have it, so don't even think about it. And like you said, otherwise it's going to be a winter for decades, maybe centuries. Saudi Arabia will cease to exist as it is. UAE definitely cease to exist. I don't know about Oman, but all these little tiddly biddlies that keep jumping up and down. Qatar, wanting to change. And things are changing in Egypt also, in Sisi, who's also very worried. So the tides are changing.
Absolutely. I think Sisi is deeply worried. He's already warning his people. He has issued statement. For instance, on December the 13th, he addressed his military officers and government-sponsored journalists, saying that we really need to make sure that what happened in Syria does not happen in Egypt. Otherwise, these terrorists would take over. He is the one who is wreaking havoc in Egypt. There are 65,000 political prisoners in Egypt. The former elected president, for the first time in the history of Egypt, an elected president, Dr. Mohamed Morsi, who was overthrown in July of 2013, and then he was imprisoned, and he died in prison. He died in court in a cage on June the 17th of 2019. He had a heart attack because they refused medication to him. He had a heart attack right over there, and he passed away right in a courtroom. And of course, Egypt today is in a very, very difficult situation economically, politically, and there are the Egyptian army is very corrupt. It has striking parallels with the Pakistani army, just like the Pakistani army has its fingers in every aspect of life in Pakistan, controlling the economy, all kinds of real estate, etc. So is the Egyptian army, and of course, these military dictators both feel the heat that has been built up, and they are trying to scare their people into supporting them. But they are the ones that have actually antagonized the people. You can't terrorize the people into submission. You can't win their sympathy or their support by killing them. That's I think something self-evident. But unfortunately, people like Sisi or General Asim Munir, etc., they don't seem to understand these things. They think that they can browbeat people into submission. Unfortunately, that's not how things work.
And the interesting thing, Dr. Bangesh, is that this guy is standing hands folded. They say, by the way, it's very interesting. They say Blinken was on his way to the washroom and he was stopped in the corridor by Victoria Nuland, who's standing there, and said, "Can you please have a few?" And, because he was in a hurry, obviously there was a pressure building up. So he couldn't even talk for more than 3 or 4 minutes. And then he had to rush off to the toilet. Blinken.
Well, I'm glad Blinken didn't wet his pants.
But the interesting thing is that both these dictators, Sisi and Asim Munir, give the same reasoning that, hey, if you don't support us, we will end up like Syria or Libya. Anyway, sir, thank you very much. I think the tipping point is going to be Iran's nuclear capability. And if I were Iran, and if I were the Rahbar, or if I were the decision maker, and I would immediately make sure that we have this capability, and will make sure that the US knows and Israel knows. That is probably going to save this world from a catastrophe. Thank you very much, Dr. Zafar Bank. It's wonderful having you here every week. Inshallah, we'll see you again next week. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and all your loved ones. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all the people who are fighting injustice and who are implementing social justice as enunciated in the Holy Quran. We wish you well, inshallah, till next week. Alhamdulillah, Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.